Well, Tina, thank you so much for helping my project.
No problem.
Did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
I had heard that, actually. My partner is very interested in lunar exploration, so...
Oh, really?
Actually, well, in space exploration in general. Yeah,
Do you know what got him interested?
You know, I don't. He's a history buff generally, but I think that sense of adventure and stuff. He ended up in finance instead of in a science and in another science, like a life science or earth science. So I think that's a sort of close second, if you like.
Well, that's interesting. Well, what do you think about it?
You know, I have mixed feelings about it. I think it would be a real shame not to do any more space exploration, for sure. I'm a geologist, for context.
Oh, really? Okay.
But actually, I'm more interested in life science. It's one of those things for life. So, you know, the cost is so astronomical, and there are so many problems here. I understand the argument as to why you would not be pursuing exploration without sort of a more specific purpose. So that idea that just for the potential for discovery, you know, seems expensive, I think, at some level. On the other hand, I think a lot of very worthwhile endeavors and discoveries have been made in that way. And so I think it would be a terrible shame to shut it down if there's the ability to do it, if we really have the resources to do it. So if we feel like we have the resources, and I honestly don't feel like in our current society that we probably would spend them in a better way. So on balance, I'm glad we're doing it. I think if we didn't spend them, we're building more weapons, we're, I don't know, making more margaritas. What are we doing, you know, with that money? I'd like to think that, you know, if it was going to be spent in some incredible endeavor to improve things on Earth, then I would say, I don't know, you know, like, to me that would be more of a challenge. But I doubt that would actually happen. So I think the arguments against doing it for financial reasons in that way are probably misguided in the sense that I don't think that's really what would be done. So I think there is still potential. I see the symbolic value of sending people. I think as soon as you start taking the human being out of the equation, there are a lot of things that people represent in that context, and it is aspirational for a lot of people at a time when I think there's a lot of confusion about what aspirations should be. So I think that idea of having exploration, I'd like to see more purposeful context for it, I think, versus chiming it as political victory and that kind of thing. I think, you know, I'd like to see more specifics about the science and what else they're going to do with it. But I understand that it doesn't necessarily have to have a ton of purpose in that way.
When you think about the future of humanity, say like 200 years out, what does it look like to you?
Not sure. Well, it's an interesting question. It depends on the day. On a pessimistic day, I could see us degenerating into sort of a multi-level civil war kind of horribly factionalized, struggling, larger scale population that's further polarized for, you know, that you have a small group of people who are isolated from it and the rest of the people are really experiencing what a good part of the world is experiencing now anyway. On a better day, I'd say that maybe we will make progress in the context of global warming and a variety of other things that are global things that are people are starting to have to deal with. Then maybe there will be improvement in equity in terms of, you know, making opportunity a little bit more of a level equal for different peoples in different places. Have a good one, Owen. Sorry, Owen's going to soccer.
No trouble.
I think it's possible if the resources, and I do see a lot of energy among younger people towards a little bit more of that. I think, you know, my kids and even the generation or two above them. I have an older mother. Kids are a lot younger than me. There's one of them now. That's Gracie. I think they have a very different perspective on what the future should be, you know, than maybe we would have grown up in a more positive one. I mean, I grew up in the middle of the Cold War and all that, and so, you know, we definitely had like nuclear winter on the mind. I don't know so much that I worry about that, but I do worry, per se, I do worry about how short-sighted much of our political and actually and sort of industrial and even our science sort of I don't want to say organization isn't the right word, infrastructure is kind of focused. I'm not sure it's headed the right way. So I don't know. I think it's possible that things will get a little more globalized, a little bit more level, which will feel like going downwards for some and up for others. Right? I think that wouldn't be a bad thing. Yeah. I know we're in the process of downsizing. Actually, we're moving. We're here because we're having our house sold, so somebody's out seeing our house.
Oh, okay.
And that's we're having pizza at the park.
That's.
But we're downsizing, and actually, I think that's a good thing for us because we decided it's kind of gross, a little bit, like the way we're living here. So it's a little bit gross. Just and so we're downsizing a little bit and moving to a little bit different. We're moving northeast to a little bit community with a little bit different sense of priorities. And I don't know. So in that context, I'd like to think that things are drifting that way, but then I see that there is this possibility it will go completely the opposite. Right. So I don't know. I think it could go either way.
Do you think we have people who are living off of the Earth as like their home in like communities, say on Mars or other places?
Excuse me. Rephrase the question.
Oh, in 200 years, do you think
we could? I think 200 years would be quick. I think people underestimate the challenges of actually surviving and building communities. I think we could certainly have something like the space station on Mars or other, maybe Mars. Let's say Mars. Mars, or the moon. I don't see that the challenge for me, the moon would necessarily need to be terribly worse than the space station with relatively small advances. I think farther than Mars or terribly different than Mars is a different question. We'd have to have some sort of real breakthrough in technology really from a travel standpoint, right? Or communication standpoint. I think you'd have to, and critical mass wise, I don't know. Yeah, 200 years is not that far away.
I know.
I know people think it's not far away, but if there were real significant changes in the way that we can move around, and if we made a lot of advances, probably either in fusion technology or in solar technology to make it much more efficient, I think it's possible that you could have people living there. I still think you'd have to figure out a way to make it self-sustainable for food and water, right?
Right.
That's not entirely clear to me. I don't know enough about Mars to think about the water question intelligently. But I don't think it's impossible. But I don't think it would be large communities yet. We don't even do large communities on Earth all that well.
That's right.
Really, I struggle to see. But I do think like a space station kind of thing. Certainly, I think you could. I think again, you'd want to be thoughtful about why you're doing it. If you were doing that, I don't think you just want it to be a symbol. I think you'd want to think about that as, is it an outpost for further, what am I doing with that? In order to justify it to a population that might be undergoing quite a bit more stress here, right? And is it progress just to spread problems, right, to other planets? I'm a big sci-fi fan, right? So I read a lot about that. Like, do you just expand because expansion's not always good, right? So I know for a capitalist economy, right? Like bigger is better, right? Growth is always good. Growth is not always good, right? Certainly not always good for the planet, but it wouldn't be good for another planet either. And so our ability to are we just thinking about expanding because we want to move our problems to another place, right? Like we need more space to like exercise bad behavior. Like if we're just doing that, I hope not, actually.
Or maybe to get away from bad behavior. I think, in every way, like living on Mars would be worse than Earth, except for one way.
Yes.
And that is
the other people.
There's that. But you could be in a world that didn't have, say, nuclear weapons and, kind of like nuclear Armageddon wasn't like.
I think the thing is to get there, you probably would become equipped, actually, with the equivalent of that. So I suspect you would arrive with all the problems. You would still arrive with humanity. And I think, ultimately, unless we can figure out how to live with ourselves, transporting ourselves to another place, this is a bonus for reading lots of sci-fi or thinking about it. I'm writing a sci-fi novel, right?
So, you're writing one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
really?
That's awesome.
And actually, part of the theme of the novel is sort of escaping Earth. But the hypothesis is that we get sort of volunteer help from terraformers who aren't necessarily. We make a bargain, and our bargain is to get off our miserable planet that we've spoiled, right? So the idea is that they terraform planets for us, but not necessarily in the way we were thinking. And so we spread, but ultimately people end up being people in those new places. And so that although there are new and interesting things that make it worth reading for a sci-fi fan, I hope eventually, but we still bring ourselves. And I think it's a mistake when people think, it's sort of like when groups who are persecuted for religious reasons and stuff move somewhere new, they don't really escape people ultimately. You know, like it's a short-term solution because you still at some level are still surrounded by other people. And ultimately within your own group, typically, there is still going to be conflict about the same things that caused you problems in the first place.
And you know, you mentioned about like these groups who are persecuted and want to go someplace else
Yeah.
to escape persecution. It's actually not persecution that they escape, but who the persecutor and persecutee is. Like,
Yeah,
they
it's
just
just-
become the dominant group.
Well,
in
that's
the-
right, exactly. So you bring all that baggage with you, and then it just becomes internalized. And yeah, it's sort of writ large, then writ small, gets bigger again.
Right.
And you just recreate it with a different cast of characters. And I think there's a reason that occurs in sci-fi a lot because it's a real theme. You know, there are a lot of people, and I think so. So to me, if we were ever considering colonizing another planet, you would want to say, hey, we're going to do something different there, something that's different enough. You found out something about Mars that said, hey, it would be much easier to do X on Mars. Like we could build X really well there, right? Now that would be a reason to go say, hey, we would have a colony on Mars that would do this much more efficiently, etc. And maybe you would say, hey, like try and have, maybe there's a group of like-minded people who wanted to live in a certain way that would go together. But ultimately, like if those people have kids and stuff, their kids aren't necessarily going to want that, right? Like,
Sure.
so when you have groups of individuals going, you want to try and, I think, not count on the persistence of vision, if you like, for that kind of thing, at least to my mind. Oh, stop. I know. You don't know her. Why are you barking at her? Yeah? She didn't look dangerous to me. I think it's fine. But anyway, so that, I guess that's my, you know, like, I think there could be, but I hope it's like a space station. And more than, I don't think we're ready for colonies. I don't think we're grown up. I don't know that we're good enough citizens. Yet, just yet.
Well, Tina, I really appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you. That was much longer than you intended, I'm sure, because I like to talk.
No, I like to listen. I just don't. Telling people, hey, can we talk for 30 minutes is usually a much more of a.
Look at Gracie's ready to go, though. She's like,
Yeah,
God,
there's
Mom
that.
just went talking and talking and talking. What do you think, Gracie? Should we have a colony on Mars? What about the moon? Do you think, why not? Why shouldn't people live on the moon? Well, no, if we could figure that out, do you think it would be something we should do? You don't have a strong opinion. That's fair. It's better maybe not to have an opinion if you don't have a strong basis for it, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have opinions just for the sake of having opinions.
And sometimes, yeah, we make them up on the fly because we're expected to.
Yeah, that's
Then we
true.
get stuck with them.
It's true, we do. Like accepting Bean when he was a puppy just because he was cute.
Just because well, being cute's a good reason.
And now he's kind of stinky and nasty. And he's still